where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC-7 Extra Sunday. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Ross. These are challenging times for school districts across Texas, and El Paso is no exception. The three major school districts, El Paso, Isleta, and Socorro, all facing declining student enrollment and budget deficits. Local school districts have been discussing budgets for the upcoming school year for the past few weeks. On Monday, the El Paso district approved its budget for the 2024-25 school year with an $18.5 million deficit that will be covered by money from the district's reserve fund. Last week, the Isleta School District approved the budget for the next school year and plans to use about $17.2 million from its reserves to balance the budget, while the Socorro School District has an expected $41 million shortfall for the next school year they must cover. Additionally, the Socorro District is being overseen by two conservators from the Texas Education Agency. Tonight, we'll discuss the budget crisis for local schools from three perspectives. First, we'll hear from Isleta District Superintendent Dr. Xavier De La Torre. And later in the program, we'll be joined by Ross Moore, president of the El Paso American Federation of Teachers, and State Representative Mary Gonzalez, a member of the Higher Education Committee in the Texas House, who will share with us the battle over education funding at the state capitol. Joining me now, Dr. Xavier De La Torre from the Isleta Independent School District. Dr. De La Torre has been in the top spot at YSD since 2014. Before that, you were superintendent at the Socorro School District, and you were also the county superintendent of schools for the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And welcome to ABC-7 Extra, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as I just mentioned, your district is dipping into its reserves to balance the budget for the 2024-25 school year. This marks the third year in a row of deficit spending for YSD. What do you say to taxpayers in your district who are asking why this is happening?
Well, I think it's misleading. There's a misconception that it's deficit spending. It's only deficit spending if you don't take steps throughout the entire year to reduce that deficit. The unfunded reserve, the fund balance, is there for unexpected, unanticipated, one-time expenses.
Like a rainy day fund, in
a
other
rainy
words.
day fund, and we're certainly, it's certainly raining as far as resources from the state. But in our case, of the $17.2 million, 3.5 of that is going to teachers in the form of a holiday stipend. That's a one-time investment. It isn't and shouldn't be expected a year from now. $6 million is in response to a failed audit at the state level, a SHARS audit, where normally we would be reimbursed that money. Those are services for those students with special needs. The Texas Education Agency was found to be out of compliance. The federal government is not going to reward them by providing them those resources, and so they're not going to provide them to us. Again, unexpected, but also not expected to come back and visit a year from now. And then finally, as a result of HB3, school districts were required to have armed officers at every campus. That cost us almost $3 million, and we received approximately $750,000 from the state. All three of those expenses that in the aggregate create the $17.2 million will not revisit us next year. And so that's exactly what the unassigned fund balance is for. Now, there are neighboring districts and other districts in the state that have what's called a structural deficit. And that's a deficit where they're having to use fund balance, reserves, the piggy bank, to pay for ongoing expenses like salary schedules, health and welfare benefits. Those will visit them this year, and they'll visit them again next year. So if they don't address them this year, they're going to compound over time and become almost impossible to manage.
Now, you mentioned that $500 holiday stipend that the board approved for teachers. So if that stipend is coming from the reserves, was a pay raise also considered at the same time?
No, and the reason we stayed away from the pay raise from the salary schedule is because once it goes on the salary schedule, it's on the salary schedule for all perpetuity. This allows us to demonstrate to our employees that we value their service, that we value their support, but that we're not in a position to be cavalier and make a long-term investment at this time. We're going to wait for the legislative session in January to see whether or not, once the governor secures his vouchers, whether or not they'll increase the per student allocation, which would then allow us to start putting money back into the salary schedule.
Now, of course, your district, as well as El Paso and Socorro, all seeing declining student enrollment. Where are these students going?
Well, I want to make sure people understand that the Ysleta Independent School District has been in a pattern of declining enrollment since 1987. So we're very, very good at this. We've been doing it for over 30 years. We know every year we're going to have less students the following year than we had the previous year. And so our budget development process, our timeline starts in September, not in January. And what we've been able to do is very accurately project enrollment for the coming year, average daily attendance, and take action using positive attrition during the school year. That means retirements, resignations, people relocating, where those positions aren't filled. They're eliminated. And so by the time we get to the end of the year, we have reconciled the budget. The number of adults in the organization align nicely with the projected enrollment for the following year. Having said that, it does make for an organization that has to be very intentional, very purposeful, an organization that has infinite needs but finite resources. But we've been doing it for about 35 years and we'll continue to do that. That $17.2 million that it currently appears as a deficit will likely be closer to $2 million, if not zero, by the time we start to address the 25-26 budget.
How do you respond to some of your teachers who are having to work second jobs in order to keep their households running? You know, they certainly can't practice deficit spending or run up their credit cards. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're certainly not cavalier about that. We understand that we are working with what we refer to as the 1925 budget. By that I mean we're being funded at the same level, at the same rate as we were being funded in 2019. But the prices that we're paying for fuel and utilities and all of the things that our employees are paying for has increased by over 20%. And so when the organization feels that pain, so do the employees. And I think that's why it was important to the board to at least do the holiday stipend in the first semester. And the board reserves the right to give a retention stipend in the spring if things improve. But it is tough out there, no doubt about it.
Now, the El Paso School District is considering selling off unused properties to help with the deficit in their district. Are there unused properties in the Ysleta School District that could be sold to help lessen this financial blow? I can think of personally three off the top of my head: Desert View, Camino Real, and Valley View Middle.
Well, Valley View Middle, we built Del Valle Middle School on that property, so it's not available.
All right.
But we do have 11. We have 11 school sites, campuses that are available and are for sale. Now again, when you sell a property, it's one-time money. You only get the value of that property once, so again it goes into the fund balance, and then that fund balance is really restricted or reserved for one-time purchases. So selling properties will help you in a short-term crisis. It will not help you, and you cannot sustain the operating cost relying on selling properties. But yes, all 11 properties are for sale.
Bottom line, what's the way out of this deficit? I imagine as a superintendent, you're controlling whatever spending you can control, but you can't really control what's happening at the state level with the legislatures and the Texas Education Agency not increasing the per student costs that are going on to the district, right?
Yeah, I think the distinction is that unlike a lot of school districts in the state, we're not relying on the legislative session. We can find our way out of this simply by doing what we've done very well for almost 3 decades, and that is we reconcile the ledger and we make sure that the number of employees in the organization matches the number of students. And so if you're receiving a per student allocation, that allocation is designed to provide them with the adults, the support that they need. As long as that doesn't become imbalanced, you should be fine. We're going to be fine. We're not in any way concerned about whether or not we're going to have enough money to continue and operate the school district. Like I said, we've been doing this for 3 decades.
Dr. Xavier De La Torre, Superintendent of the Ysleta School District, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Still ahead, we'll be joined by a teachers union president and a state representative from El Paso as we continue our discussion on the budget crisis for local school districts. You're watching ABC-7 Extra Sunday.
Of course, the GMC Terrain offers different drive modes. What about Weekend Warrior mode? Or you don't see that everyday mode? How about out of the office mode? Or even,
are you out of your mind?
Mode. Want a mode for everything? Sign and Drive is here. Get this ultra-low mileage lease on this 2024 Terrain SLE for around $379 per month with 0 due at signing.
See your El Paso Las Cruces GMC dealers.
The stars are aligning for the sale of the summer. The Independence Sale at Household Furniture starts now. Save up to $1,000 or choose 60 months special financing. Plus, get a free HD TV with purchase of select closeout items. Get this leather reclining power sofa for just $20 a month. This 6-piece dinette for just $15 a month. And this 6-piece queen storage bedroom for just $32 a month. The 4th of July sale going on now at Household Furniture.
As El Paso's premier mental health hospital, Rio Vista Behavioral provides comprehensive, state-of-the-art inpatient psychiatric and substance abuse services for adults and teens. Our 132-bed facility allows us to provide compassionate and individualized care. With our 28-day substance abuse recovery program, prison program for the LGBTQ+ community, and our outpatient treatment programs, we tailor our services to meet every need. Begin your path of hope and healing with us. Rio Vista Behavioral.
Unique style, cutting-edge innovation, and thoughtful details. Inspired by you. From the brand that delivers amazing ownership experiences. This is the first ever all-electric RZ. This is Lexus. Electrified.
Get special offers on select Lexus RZ models.
And welcome back to ABC-7 Extra Sunday. I'm Mark Ross. This week we're discussing the financial crisis facing local schools. My guests right now are Ross Moore, the president of the El Paso American Federation of Teachers, and State Representative Mary Gonzalez, who serves on the Public Education Committee. And my thanks to both of you for coming on. Mr. Moore, first of all, how many local teachers are members of El Paso AFT, and which districts do you represent?
We have 2,350 members active right now in EPISD and Canutillo ISD.
Okay. Now on Monday afternoon, the El Paso School District approved their budget for the next school year, $542 million. That takes effect on July 1st. Now what wasn't mentioned in the district's news release on the budget was a $12.1 million shortfall, which will need to be covered by the district's general fund. What is the biggest concern you have as a teachers union about the continuing deficit spending model that the local districts have adopted?
First, it's the governor's fault. It's not the district's fault. And just a quick correction, they call it a $12 million. They're taking an additional $6 million out, $6 million out of the general fund to pay for other stuff they wanted to add. So really,
it's $18 million.
It's an $18 million deficit.
Okay.
It was kind of interesting to watch them wiggle and not say 18, but that's the deficit this year. Every district in town has that problem.
Right. Now, it is, of course, the job of the teachers' unions to advocate for their members in at least one district last year. Trustees acquiesced to the union's request and approved teacher raises against the advice of district staff. Districts can't afford the pay raises you demand, so how do you respond to that?
One, I understand where they're coming from, and that's why when we talked about a one-time stipend that doesn't carry over into the pay scales down the year. So going with that premise, my question now is, if you can't afford $1,000 for my members, how do you afford $10,800 for your senior leaders in open flat stipends? How does the superintendent get a $25,000 one-time stipend?
So that's where it stands, basically.
Yeah. The language of the stipend is very loose. There's a lot of outs in it. And my next question is going to be, what are you going to take off my members' tables, off their plates to lower their workload?
Okay. Representative Gonzalez, let me turn to you. Let's talk for a moment about the challenges that came with House Bill 1, the education financing bill. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick spent most of last year's session and the 4 special sessions that followed lobbying to lawmakers to include their school choice plan, which would give parents vouchers to send their child to a private school or use those funds for homeschooling. But that provision was eventually stripped from HB 1. So what happened after that?
Well, school finance is very complicated, but first off, I would like to say that really I feel a lot of empathy for our school districts. They are stuck in a political dynamic that is not their fault. Right now, the Texas budget, so the state in House Bill 1, the state budget, we did put new funding in, $7 billion of new funding. Granted, it was contingent funding, and so on a school finance bill. So what ended up happening is we did not pass the school finance bill because while both chambers did pass a bill, the House chamber did not have a bill that included vouchers. And so because it didn't include vouchers, the Senate wouldn't even hear it. And ultimately there is over $5 billion right now that could provide relief to our schools that is just being held aside in a current budget already appropriated because the contingency bill was not passed. So I think that's the first thing we all have to know is that right now, this all could be remedied. Teachers could be paid a living wage. Our schools wouldn't be having to do these budget cuts if we were just released the $5 billion. The second thing I'll say is it's really honestly irresponsible for a state not to act in this critical moment in time. We're facing one of the largest teacher crises we've ever experienced in this state. And when you have a crisis, if you don't address it, it only gets worse. So what ended up happening is vouchers were used as a political tool in order to try to, vouchers were used in order to try to pass, and they didn't pass. And when they didn't pass, there was retribution for that. I don't think teachers should have to feel that.
Now, the state allocates $6,160 per student to districts, but there's not been an increase from the state in that basic allotment per student since 2019. Why?
Well, we have the state, I will give the state a little bit of credit. While we have not increased the basic allotment, we have increased other areas. School safety funding, for example, we put $208 billion there. We have done more for special education or bilingual education, but we're right. The basic allotment is kind of the equalizing metric that we use, and we should be increasing it. One of the arguments I made multiple times last session is that the basic allotment should increase with inflation. And that's not happening right now. So even when we increased it in 2019, it had been a decade before that we had increased it. And so as we know, inflation is a very real thing and schools are feeling it, so we're not keeping up with that. Another thing that we should consider changing is that you're right. Schools get per pupil funding, but that's based on attendance, not necessarily enrollment. And with everything that's happened post-COVID, we know that we need to reconsider how we do some of these formulas, because whether or not there's 20 kids in that classroom or 18, there still has to be that same teacher, the same electricity bill, etc. So we need to start thinking about, is this formula outdated, starting with the basic allotment, but other areas as well.
So when it comes to dealing with the loss of students, how should school districts address that problem?
Well, it's unfortunate that the school district isn't given a lot of tools to address that problem, right? First and foremost, the public schools in Texas are in essence set up for failure by our leadership, right? So one is I think our leadership has done a lot to dismantle public trust in our public schools when we know that our schools are actually outperforming in so many ways. We have amazing teachers, but the increase of our charter school system is competing with public funds. And so not only the potential oncoming of vouchers should that ever pass, now we're creating multiple finance systems that are equitable. And so the impact is huge. And ultimately, it's our school districts that have to navigate that. So how should school districts deal with enrollment is one, continue to share not only the good work that our school districts are doing, but find important ways to bring our families back into our school districts. But again, that's competing with charter schools that don't have to have, for example, teachers that have the same qualifications so they can pay less, right? And so schools right now really have a lot to overcome, but I think continuing to spread the message of why public schools are important is going to be an important step, and that's an important step for all of us.
The budget crisis for local schools, that's our topic tonight here on ABC-7 Extra Sunday. We'll continue our discussion in a moment.
The excellence of driving a Buick is matched by the excellence of the dealership experience when you own a Buick. Buick, exceptional by design.
Sign and Drive is here. Get this ultra-low mileage lease on this 2024 Encore GX Preferred for around $343 per month with zero due at signing.
We had the best vacation.
Yeah. And it was easy with the points we earned with the flagship card from Navy Federal Credit Union. I can't imagine where we'd be without them.
They had the best vacation. Look at all those fish. I love our points.
Yeah, me too.
Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission.
Welcome back to Topgolf.
I'm Birdie Baker.
And I'm Chaz Mulligan.
I'm fired up, Chaz.
You sure are. We're at Bay 208, where the Ruiz family is enjoying free 30. A free 30 minutes of golf, weekdays until 5 p.m. when you book a reservation.
Did you just say free birdie?
No, I said free 30. A free 30 minutes of golf every weekday until 5 p.m.
Oh, cheeseburger. Delicious.
No. I said
I
free
love my
30, a free 30
cheeseburgers.
minutes.
Have you ever had a hot dog on a cheeseburger?
I'm gonna be late.
Sorry.
And drive safe out there as there's plenty of traffic heading to today's big game. Ready to go.
You almost missed the start of the game.
Right now, qualified lessees can lease a new 2024 Tundra SR5 for $449 a month for 36 months. Offer ends July 1st.
And welcome back to ABC-7 Extra Sunday. I'm Mark Ross. We are back with our guests, Ross Moore, president of the El Paso American Federation of Teachers, and State Representative Mary Gonzalez, who is on the Higher Education Committee in Austin. And I apologize, Representative, for screwing that up in the last segment. Now,
no, it's fine.
All right, I have a question for both of you. While the legislature doesn't meet again until next January, the Texas American Federation of Teachers is already watching some of the legislative action taking place in Austin. Last month, Texas Speaker of the House Dade Phelan released what's called interim charges. Those are actions he wants committees in the House to study before the session begins. Among them, the Education Savings Account or private school vouchers. Both of you opposed that. The governor and the lieutenant governor arguing parents have a right to place their children in a school of their choice, and they're already paying property taxes for their education. So is there any area where you would be willing to compromise? Representative Gonzalez, let's start with you.
I came to the legislature, Mark, I'm an educator at heart. I have a PhD in education. I fundamentally believe that education is a way to make a society an equal society. So I genuinely think that public education is critical. There is no research to demonstrate that vouchers actually help with student outcomes. And on top of that is that the state doesn't have unlimited funding. So when you do create another education system, like a voucher system, all you're doing is taking already very sacred resources, like we've heard deficits right now in school districts from our local school districts. The state of Texas has one obligation for the Constitution, and it's to create an equitable public education system for all kids. When we start to create a voucher system, the kids who are most vulnerable are the ones who are more likely to fall through the cracks. All research shows that the kids hurt the most, for example, are kids in our special education programs. So am I willing to compromise vulnerable students for a political agenda and an agenda that doesn't actually have any positive outcomes for education? I'm sorry, no. There are lots of areas where I work with my colleagues across the aisle and I come up with collaborative solutions, but I will never, ever put kids' futures at a crossroads just because of talking points. So I really wish that the governor and lieutenant governor could look at the research and understand why so many of us are against the vouchers in our state. But it's not an accident that a bipartisan coalition of legislators in the House voted against vouchers, and it's because we understood the negative ramifications.
Mr. Moore, your response.
I'll give you a real quick answer, then flush it out. Not only no, but blank no. We're not going to compromise. You know, Messiah Vader and I disagree on a lot of things. This is one topic, one issue where there's no daylight between us whatsoever. Now, I'm not sure what happened to the governor, whether it's his ideology or he didn't get enough hugs from his second grade teacher. He's at war with public education and determined to break it. What he did this year, taking the students of EPISD and Conneaut ISD as hostages, is unforgivable.
All right. Now, Representative Gonzalez, what can the El Paso delegation do now ahead of the session in January 2025 to work towards compromising on school funding? You will have new blood in the delegation with the recent election of Vince Pettis to take the District 77 seat. He's already said he's opposed to school vouchers. And of course, too, you are also facing additional Republicans who were just recently elected who want Governor Abbott's plan to go through. Talk about that.
First of all, I still think there's one other election, that's the November election. And I'm hoping that more Texans come out to vote in the November election to demonstrate how important supporting our public schools is. So I don't think that there's anything set in stone for next legislative session. The first thing that we're working on right now is making sure that the $5 billion that currently does exist somehow does get released. Again, we could very easily create some relief for our schools right now if the Legislative Budget Board were to approve the release of that $5 billion to our local schools. That could just easily be done by increasing the basic allotment. So that's important to note. The second thing is, I hope that going in the next legislative session that schools aren't held hostage again by the governor and lieutenant governor. I know that's a hope, but I do genuinely feel that there still aren't the votes to pass vouchers in the House. And until then, I can't see another session where we do nothing to support our schools, specifically through major crises like our teacher crisis and our workforce shortages. So I think that there's a reason we have multiple chambers. The Texas House is the voice of the people, and the people are saying that they still don't want vouchers. And so if that's the case, then the governor and lieutenant governor need to honor that.
So let me ask you this. Should the voucher bill, I guess, go through in this next legislative session, how many students would that necessarily affect? How many families would that necessarily affect?
I mean, there were multiple variations of the voucher bill when we were in session, and it had different amounts of students who would be able to have access to the voucher funding. But ultimately, it will impact all kids. It'll impact all kids because it's draining away resources from kids who, from the whole public school system. It's not like the state has an endless amount of money. We have a certain amount of money, this amount, for public education. Now, when you take it away for vouchers for only a select amount of kids, the rest of the kids in our system are going to feel that. So specifically kids in rural communities where I represent, kids in Tornillo, where are they going to use a voucher? Kids in Fort Hancock, where are they going to use a voucher? Those kids specifically are going to be the ones who feel the impact the most.
Mr. Moore, I understand the union is looking out for its members and wants what's best for them, but when school districts are faced with multi-million-dollar deficits, what can the union do at a state level to lobby lawmakers for more funding for public schools?
Focus on the hard to convince districts. Ms. Gonzalez and the El Paso delegation is known as the Golden Delegation at Texas AFT level. Yes, we're looking out for our members, but something I've learned over the years and gets lost in the shuffle. What's good for teachers is good for kids, and what's good for kids is good for teachers. So when we, fighting against vouchers, that's a line drawn in the sand we're not going to back away with. Is the governor? No. It's how the districts, from my perspective as a local president, how the districts respond to that. Right now, EPISD is benefiting from about $15,000 a year in free labor out of each one of my members. How do they reward that? And platitudes just don't cut the mustard. Again, on the issue of vouchers, superintendent and I, no distance between us, and Pete Galaviz over in Canutillo is a firebrand against them.
All right. My thanks to both you and Representative Gonzalez for being on ABC-7 Extra Sunday this week, and of course my thanks also to Superintendent of the Ysleta School District, Dr. Xavier De La Torre, for also coming on. And thank you for watching ABC-7 Extra Sunday. I'm Mark Ross. Stay safe, stay strong. I'll see you next Sunday night.